Well, good morning and welcome to City Hall. We'll get started with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Councilman McAtee if he'll lead us in the invocation this morning, and Councilman Shadid in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
Father, we thank you for this opportunity to look forward to a new year. We pray that through our deliberations, not only today, but in each council and each trust meeting and each committee meeting that comes on this year, that we would look to you for guidance. We thank you for your blessings of the past, and we look forward to the challenges of meeting the needs of our people, both immediately and into the future. Thank you for our mayor, for the leadership that he provides. Thank you for the city staff that so diligently takes the policies that we come up with and implements them for the benefit of the citizens. May the citizens and us work together for your glory and good, so that when the year is done, we might say, well done. Thank you now in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. We'll get started on the council agenda. Item 3A, it's an appointment to the Mechanical Code Review and Appeals Commission. How about a second? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 4 is the Journal of Council Proceedings. Item 4A is to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for December 18th, and item 4B is to approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for December 11th. Comments or questions about the journal? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And item 5 is request for uncontested continuances.
Nothing beyond the claim that's listed on the agenda, sir.
All right. Any other requests for uncontested continuances? Well, then let's recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. Looks like there's 6 items on the MFA. Any comments or questions here? We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Adjourn the OC MFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. There are 2 items. All right, comments or questions here? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. Just have the claims and payroll. All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Adjourn the OCEAT, reconvene the council meeting with a consent docket. All right, we have a motion and a second. Are there any individual considerations?
Mayor, if I could, I just wanted to mention 6AA and 6AF.
All right, Meg, jump right in.
All righty. Let's see if I can find them. I just really wanted to make note, 6AA is our resolution authorizing the negotiation of architectural services for the Fairgrounds new expo building. And throughout this agenda, there are a number of really important milestones, again, relating to NAPS 3, and so I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, and so that would apply as well to 6AF, which is our request for proposal to go out for our senior wellness centers. And we've had lots of discussion about this. I think it's exciting that we've come forward again with some great ideas on how to move that item, how to advance the item. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the consent docket?
How long will the bids for the wellness center, how long is the period of time that they would be out?
Councilman, the RFP will be out for 90 days.
90 days?
Yes, sir. We will have a pre-proposal meeting, and then they'll respond after that. The pre-proposal meeting, I believe, is 3 weeks from today, and then the total period will be 90 days for response.
What happened is in the pre-proposal meeting?
There'd just be a discussion on the points of the RFP, and we'll be able to also answer any questions that might come up. It's kind of like a pre-bid meeting that we have with construction.
So more than likely, the individuals who will attend the pre-proposal meeting will more than likely be the individuals who are the only ones that will be interested in the RFP. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Larry?
Yeah, Jim, when I talked to you the other day, I got the impression there was going to be a presentation on the RFP.
We can do that. We don't have a presentation, but Nicole Franklin is here to talk about the RFP. Nicole Franklin is with ADG.
Good morning. Yes, we have, we're bringing back to you today a revised RFP. Some of you have been at some of the wellness meetings, so you're familiar with some of this, but we'll just give you a little bit of background. The first RFP came out last fall, as you know, and we just received a couple of responses. Neither were accepted. So we began some additional research regarding possible options and starting to work on crafting a revised RFP. Really, the goal was to increase flexibility in hope of drawing a larger pool of responses. For the past few months, we've talked with many potential partners, talking with them about maybe why they hadn't responded before. We've also spoken with city council, city staff, and many organizations who currently provide various different services to seniors, maybe not comprehensively, but individual services. Anyone that we felt could provide input on this, the wellness centers or the RFP. Going forward. In the past month, we also received input from Doug and Ellen Gallo, who are with Lifespan Design Studios. They are a sub-consultant of GSB, who were selected as the architect for the first wellness center. They are experts in senior wellness centers, and we've worked very closely with them as well in person and over several telephone conversations in looking at this final draft. So they have also looked at what we've come up with, what the subcommittee has come up with changes and modifications. We've been to the subcommittee with this final draft. They've looked at it several times as the draft has developed. They've made recommendations. Different council members have been there, made recommendations. So we've incorporated all of those changes. There's definitely much more flexibility in the size, scope, types of services. It's much more clear on the city's requirement for ownership interest. That was very confusing for proposers in the past. They didn't understand the various options for which they could satisfy that requirement. So generally, it's more flexible, more clear. We've had great response at each subcommittee meeting. We've had many potential proposers come to the subcommittee meetings over the past few months, ask excellent questions, provide input as to things that they might like to see that would be more enticing or flexible for them. So this is what we have today. It's been to the subcommittee. It's been to the advisory board. And we feel like that it's ready to go at this time.
Yeah, it does seem very promising. Thanks for coming by.
You're welcome. Any questions?
Larry, any comments?
Just one question. In the interim, some of the committee went to Rogers, Arkansas.
They did.
And looked at the Senior Wellness Center there. Mm-hmm. And I was able to sit in on just a part of the meeting where they came back, and they seemed to give a very glowing report of what they found over there.
Yes.
If I was a provider here in Oklahoma City and I knew what was going on in Rogers, Arkansas, and I thought that is something that we'd like to pick up and move to Oklahoma City as one of the centers. Does the new RFP give me enough flexibility to model that in my response to you?
Certainly. It's very flexible. That center is a little bit different. It's a sort of a regional center, and it is heavily subsidized by the city, but it does have a lot of the same elements that we've, you've heard mentioned here that could be a possibility. But certainly, I believe that this RFP is very flexible and will allow for very much creativity and partnerships and more definitely broader responses than before.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Gary?
Just a quick comment on AB, which is the site investigation report for the park. Number one, I thought it was an excellent report. Actually, with the photographs of the trees and everything, I kind of enjoyed going through that. But just want to make sure everybody realizes that although it's a recommendation and not a final decision, we have seen some recommendation on the tree removal in the park based on the arbor, whatever they call it, definition of which ones are mature and need to come down and which ones can be saved and everything. So with all we went through over here, I want to make sure everybody knows we've started receiving notice of what they're talking about in the park down there. So.
Any other comments on the consent docket? All right, let's vote. And it passes unanimously. On to the concurrence docket. All right. Comments or questions on the concurrence docket? Larry?
Yes, sir. Jim, is Marcia prepared to answer some questions?
She's supposed to be. I haven't seen her yet this morning. Let me see if she's in the back. Mr. McAtee had asked me last week, because of some of the improvements we're doing to the water system and some of that are on the consent docket this morning, if Marcia could come in and give us a little bit of an update on some of the improvements we're doing and how that may affect the western part of the city, which is the place that's stressed during times of high water use in the summer.
Sure, happy to. We have improvements going on in all parts of the city where we've had pinch points in the water system. You'll see on today's docket some northeast improvements. We've recently approved others helping bring water northwest, but particularly the southwest has been our largest source of trauma for us in these last two extremely hot summers. We have 4 miles of additional pipeline in construction. 48-inch line that's coming up Portland Avenue from Southwest 104th, paralleling the east side of the airport. We're building a pump station, a very large pump station, which will help us a great deal when complete. It will not be complete this summer. But so additional pipe going in. You're looking at several miles of additional design work getting approved today. Those are being prosecuted. So today we're complete to Southwest 104th in Portland, continuing to move west. We'll be at Southwest 54th in Portland before next summer with additional pipeline. Our goal is to get past I-40, the intersection of I-40 and the Turnpike by 2015. So we're prosecuting the work very quickly. The design work on the calendar today helps remove another pinch point along Reno Avenue. That's very important to our overall ability to get water. So lots of stuff underway. Each piece makes it better. Perfection around 2015, but better and better until we get there.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the concurrence docket? Marcia?
I'm a little slow.
While they're getting her, why don't you go?
I wanted to ask the question on 7C, which is another water line extension. I'm sorry, Marcia.
No, thank you.
But at 120 Northeast 122nd and Eastern,
Yes.
the water line, is this a new line, or is the lines was already there and these lines are going to be replaced?
There was a smaller line in place, a 12-inch, that isn't meeting the needs in that area either. We were able to design rapidly a couple of miles of pipeline that because it's a little bit more open construction than we have in some other parts of the city, we're able to prosecute that job pretty quickly.
But let's step back. Outside of the western part of the area which Mr. McAtee has concerns about, another weak part of the system is in the
Northeast quadrant.
Well, particularly around Oklahoma Christian, up around the Memorial area up there, the Memorial and Coltrane over in that area is an area that, and actually it's one of the, geographically, it's one of the highest elevations in town. So it's hard, which is relevant to water pressures. And so that has been a weak part of the system, and there's been growth in that area over the years, but there has not been growth in the distribution to get the water over that area.
So we're putting
this
in
is an attempt to alleviate that.
In that area, we're putting about 2.5 miles of water pipe in before next summer. We're really excited to have it because that's been a place where we have difficulty providing more service. So it opens up, we think, some opportunities for new development along the way. Again, fairly easy construction because about 1.5 miles of it doesn't have a lot of development on either side. So further, again, northwest, we're making improvements coming out of tied to or made in conjunction with paving projects that are underway that are bringing water further west toward our pump station on Morgan Road. That's a key factor for us in supplying the far northwest.
Well, is this in conjunction with some of the other infrastructure improvements that's in
Yes,
that area?
we're also building a major transmission main east out of the Hefner plant along Britton Road, building about 4 miles of pipe there as well. Again, helps provide more water supply into the far north and northeast part of the city.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
All right, ready to vote the concurrence docket? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Move on to item 8. These are items that require a separate vote. We'll start with a street closing in Ward 2. This is Northwest 51st Street between Independence and Grand. Ed, you okay with this?
It passed the Planning Commission unanimously, no protests, and I move for approval.
Okay. You have a second? Second. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8B is our street furniture ordinance, and this is up for a final hearing.
Can I ask Rick some questions?
Sure.
If he can.
Rick had a tough weekend. Rick had a slight fall trying to put away some Christmas decorations, I believe, out of the attic, but I think he'll be healed up in a few days.
Try. The moaning gets too loud, let me know.
Rick, can I just follow up on, we had some conversations the first 2 times that this came before, and I just want to clarify some issues. First, basically we have 3 types of advertising for our transit system. One is bus benches, one is bus shelters, and the third would be on the bus itself, bus wraps, and then advertising on the interior and the back.
Correct.
So if you look at and we split the revenue from that. COPTA gets some, and then the vendor gets some.
On the bus side, that's true. That's a complete split.
Let's just talk about the bus side first.
All right.
So on the bus side, the bus wraps that go around, we split that 50-50. The advertising on the inside of the bus, we get 60% of the revenue, and the vendor gets 40%.
Correct.
On the exterior, we get 70% of the revenue, and they get 30%.
Correct.
Okay. On the bus shelters, what is our arrangement there?
Our arrangement there is it's essentially a fixed guarantee price, a minimum that we would get. We've never been able to achieve our goal of revenue sharing, so it's always been a minimum payment that we receive on those.
So it's a certain percentage if you hit a certain threshold.
Correct.
And if you don't hit that threshold, you get a minimum amount, which is about $14,000 a year.
Correct.
The revenue on the buses is about $200,000 a year.
Correct.
On the bus benches, what is the arrangement?
Bus benches are privately owned, and there is no advertising split on that.
So on bus benches, 100% of the revenue goes to the vendor and 0% goes to COPTA.
Correct.
So what is the rationale for the variation in splits, with COPTA getting as much as 70% on interior advertising, but 100 and 0 on bus benches?
I think generally, and it's not just unique to us, I think the argument there would be who owns the asset. Clearly, as we looked at the industry averages, we find that buses obviously owned by the transit agency and tend to get higher percentages. Relative to shelter advertising, there are some transit agencies that own their own shelters and their own bus benches and do revenue splits, but they're more in proportion to the 50-50, 55-45 type of split is what we found. Historically, we've not had the capital to go out and invest in bus shelters or invest in bus benches, and as a result, the private parties have provided those assets, The agreements, given that they're providing the assets, has been that, they've held to a higher share. Bus benches was never, under the old ordinance, perceived to be anything other than private. So once they had a bus bench design that was approved by the city engineer, it was all their deal. On shelters, we did at least get into a shelter arrangement to get some minimal payback, and that's something we'd be looking at of enhancing. But it's still, I think, if you want to talk about why one way versus the other, it's probably who holds the asset.
But bus shelters, the private holds the asset,
Yes.
and yet there's a split.
True.
What percentage, do you know, what percentage is it that we get if we hit that threshold, and what is the threshold of surplus?
Off the top of my head, I honestly don't remember the percentage on the bus shelters.
And we've never conducted an audit to determine whether they're hitting that threshold.
We haven't done, what we do is what they do provide a summary of revenue that they receive because they book that advertising revenue separately so that we know the total dollar value coming in, but it's never been high enough to achieve that threshold number.
2 weeks ago, we heard from a vendor that said that they received about $350 a bus bench.
Correct.
Have you had discussions with anybody else about what they receive in terms of revenue?
Yeah, we based on that comment, we went out, since we had no history on that, and took a look at what as an industry average we might say is out there. Generally speaking, you're in the $100 a month range. A lot of this is dependent upon the location. The better the locations from an advertising perspective, the higher they charge. So there may be higher priced shelter stops, but then likewise, if you want to do an A through F scale like a school grade, there's going to be those D's and F's locations that don't generate very much. So my number of 100 is a pretty broad industry number, I think.
Did they indicate that some percentage didn't have any advertising on the bus bench?
Yeah, I think generally speaking that you would expect somewhere between 70 and 80% of, if you're doing a good job and selling bus bench advertising, that let's say 70 to 80% of your benches should be generating revenue, but there's always going to be some percentage, whether it's 20 or whether it climbs to 50. I mean, that kind of dependent upon the nature of the city, but there'll always be some that have that won't have cash generating advertising. There may be public service announcements, something like that, but seldom are you going to have 100% of your benches actually generating revenue.
My understanding was that Tyler Media had shared with you that 40% of their bus benches had no advertising on it.
And that could be from time to time. They're here so they could speak to that, but that's true.
Has Tyler Media indicated that they're willing to do an audit? I want to really nail this down.
We've already had those conversations, and they are willing to do that.
When?
I would expect it very shortly. We met last week on that subject, so they know what we're after, and we'll do that.
So can you help me understand? So we're going to move from this, and then we're going to move into negotiations about revenue splits on bus shelters and bus benches.
That's correct. And that would be an agreement between COTPA and the vendor, whoever the vendor is. As we defined in the ordinance, we didn't really commingle advertising revenues in the ordinance. That would be a separate agreement.
And what is the timeline for those negotiations?
Well, once we know that we have a street furniture ordinance in place, as has been suggested, then we'd immediately start those negotiations.
Does the audit come before the negotiations?
Yes.
How does grandfathering in 1,200 bus benches affect those negotiations?
I don't see that is going to cause us a heartburn problem. The question as to why did we grandfather at all, really comes down to the fact of, for years, having something out there for people to sit on was better than having nothing. We didn't have a focus at that point in time in our efforts relative to transit. Our bigger issue was just trying to get sufficient funding just to keep buses on the street. And of course, over the last several years, it's been a priority item with council, and we've seen a focus to continue to try to upgrade our services. And so moving now to, we know that we've got good equipment on the street. It's still going to be a long-term challenge to keep that funding going because of situations in Washington right now relative to that funding, and I've spoken to you about that previously. But I think now we're looking at, okay, what else can we do to make our system more attractive? And that leads to the amenities that we provide at bus stops. And so that's the next focus area for us, and that's what's generating this whole ordinance review.
You have, as of this date, the date that we're grandfathering in, an itemized list of all.
Yes, we do. We know where all bus benches are for all 3 providers or all 4 providers.
I want to ask you one sentence that's in the ordinance about the grandfathering. This is on the grandfathering clause. It says, "The administrator shall have the authority from time to time to request that the director revoke those revocable permits for existing bus benches to be replaced by new street furniture or that are no longer necessary or appropriate."
Correct.
So I want to talk about the no longer necessary or appropriate, really. I showed you some slides a couple weeks ago where they're slanted and you couldn't really possibly sit on them comfortably. We would have the ability, if we saw a bus bench that we deemed inappropriate or dysfunctional, to ask that that be removed.
Yes, we do.
Any bus bench?
Yes.
Even if it was grandfathered in?
Yes.
If it's sitting behind shrubs, we can ask that that be removed?
Yeah, the grandfathering is not intended to be perpetuity. It still has to abide by the same rules, and they still have to come back each year to get request a revocable permit, which will come through the transit side, and the ordinance speaks to that. So, but as they are a revocable permit, they can be pulled at any time.
The electronic billboard at the Santa Fe Transit Hub, that's a Tyler Media contract as well with Brewer?
Yes.
Okay, do you know anything about that?
No, I really don't.
Okay. Nothing in this ordinance precludes city's participation. If at some point we decide we have the funds to buy bus shelters, nothing precludes us from then coming in one part of the city or the whole city and replacing the private vendor side and doing this ourselves.
That's true.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second, do we not? Oh, we do not. Okay, we do have one person that's signed up to speak. Let's hear from Rod Palmer.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm Rod Palmer. I spoke a couple of weeks ago on this. I'm one of the bus bench contractors. To answer your question regarding the percentages under that contract, Dr. Shadid, I believe that contract is $200 per shelter or 5%, whichever is greater. The city gets 5% or $200 a shelter. I'd like to emphasize today in the new ordinance the fact that we're going from an ordinance that contemplates multiple vendors, even the old bus bench shelter ordinance, and an ordinance where vendors requested of the city locations that they might put a shelter, to an ordinance where the director is making the application for additional shelters, and where it's been announced that all new street furniture and shelters are going to be placed under this old contract. I think it's not appropriate to shut out other vendors. As I expressed the last time, you're concerned about revenues. I think that without competition, that the revenues aren't going to be what they would be with competition. I see no reason to prevent competition in bus shelters and street furniture. If the city's setting the standard and design of the street furniture, I think it is against public policy to shut other vendors out to the exclusion, or to allow simply one vendor for the convenience of the director. And I would encourage the council to change the language of the ordinance to where it would allow additional vendors into the system. And I also question, as I did the last time I was here, the legality of a system that grants a monopoly to one vendor I suggested that this may actually be a franchise contract. Franchise contracts require a vote of the people. There's no vote of the people in this. There's no competition. There's no bidding. It's just simply given to one vendor for no valid reason that I can see. Did you have any questions?
Well, I'd ask that Rick address that. Can I ask you 2 questions based on that?
Yeah. Why don't we have Wiley address the legal aspect of it?
Kenny has talked about this with the staff. We do not believe the franchise applies to this situation. For one thing, the COPTA is doing a public service of providing bus transportation, and part of that service is having places for people to sit and wait for the buses. As far as the advertising part of that, that is totally separate and is not a public purpose, it's not a public interest, and that part of it would not be subject to a franchise. There are just several reasons why it's not a franchise issue. We're dealing with a public trust as opposed to the city, and they're not guaranteeing anything in a right-of-way. They don't have, no advertiser has the right to be in that right-of-way.
Well, maybe we can prepare something in writing that summarizes that, and then can you forward something that summarizes that argument of why to me? But I just want to ask Rick, how many bus shelters are there?
Actual shelters in the neighborhood of about 80, 85.
Okay, so do you think that, so that could be correct, $200 a bus shelter?
Yes.
If it was 70, that would give you the 14,000.
Yeah, no question the 200 is correct. I just couldn't remember the 5, whether it was 5 or 10, and I didn't want to quote that.
Okay, I'm not sure about the legality. I think that there is some public purpose in the advertising, and that it's the city's responsibility to provide transit, to provide transportation for the tens of thousands of people that don't have access to cars on Sundays, for example, which we can't currently do because we don't have enough money, to ensure the absence of discrimination, to protect the riders from harm, to improve our regional national standing in terms of ridership. We rank dead last in terms of ridership, and we need the revenue. So I would just encourage that as we go forward, we take a very hard line in negotiations. This appears to me to be a very generous deal when 100% of the revenue is going to the vendor, or a 95-5 split on bus shelters. And it's in significant contradistinction to our arrangement on the bus wraps and the advertising there. I personally, I'm not convinced that we need the vendors. I think we can go to the private sector, we can get marketers, we can give commissions to go out, and I think we can do this all in-house. I don't think we need any of the vendors. And I think that needs to remain a possibility as we enter into negotiations, that if we can't get enough concessions, then we look at doing it ourselves. So I think that significant concessions are warranted. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, I do want to comment one thing to Mr. Palmer's question about the monopoly question. It was never intended as we developed this ordinance that there would not be competition. We defined it as a vendor, and the vendor would have to have a contract with COTPA, but that doesn't preclude having other people, if they're interested in competing, to do this. And so the lawyers can stand by that as they helped write this ordinance. That was the intent.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Yeah, Skip?
Rick, maybe you can, or either one of the vendors that's here. Is it the benches and the bus shelters that has the bench? The vendor incurs all the costs as it relates to the shelter. Am I correct?
You're correct.
The city doesn't incur any of that expense.
No, as part of their permit, they are required to maintain it in good condition, keep the grass cut around it, keep it picked up, keep it clean. Those would be reasons, if we had problems with vendors of not maintaining their equipment, to have them pulled.
Okay.
So in addition, what is the cost roughly to install one of those bus shelters? Somewhere between $7,000 and $9,000?
A shelter today will probably run between 10 and 12.
Okay.
And now that's the shelter cost and perhaps the pad. You know, one of the things that we're doing in this ordinance that's helping us keep focus, we've talked about accessibility to the shelters and things, and so one reason why we have not seen new shelters going in is because of the fact that we want to make these things ADA accessible, which then brings into that whole discussion, how do you make that connection, that sidewalk connection? And so in cases where we're adjacent to a sidewalk, it may be just a small concrete addition to connect bus shelter to sidewalk, but in some cases, and you saw examples of bus benches that were put up where they're out in the middle of nowhere and nor are there sidewalks there. Now that becomes a much more expensive activity to accommodate.
But just to be clear, though, the vendor is fronting those dollars to put up the shelters?
Yes. Now, what we are trying to do, in fairness to the vendors as well, is the city, as you know, and you've spoken a lot about it, has a very aggressive sidewalk plan, whether it's through the MAPS program or whether it's through a GO bond issue, to put sidewalks out there. And so wherever we're making street enhancements and sidewalks are going in, if it's along a bus route, we're trying to focus now, how do we make that connection? We've been fortunate, COP has been fortunate to get some federal money to help pay for some of that cost, and so we are contributing federal money to try to make some of those bus connections become reality so that it's not all on the city's back to be able to do that. We have limited funding. I anticipate that we'll continue to get some amount of funding every year to be able to do that. We're talking about hundreds of thousands versus you're talking about tens of millions relative to sidewalk improvements. So it's going to be a slow process, but it's clearly a focus that we've got. It doesn't pay us to continue to put out shelters or benches that not everybody can get to.
All right. Larry?
Just to clarify something for me, if you would, please, Rick. If I was a businessman out there and I saw a location that I thought that a bus shelter would be a good business deal for me to invest $10,000 to $12,000 to put that shelter in, that $10,000 to $12,000 would be mine. I could come and apply through COPTA to get a permit to build that and sign a contract with you to do it. And there's nothing in this ordinance that would prohibit me from competing with the existing providers that are providing that service today. Is that true?
That's correct. The only thing that we would do from a COPTA perspective is we'd want to make sure that that shelter location that you're proposing actually qualifies as a shelter location. And by that I mean, I've talked to you about Title VI, at least I've mentioned this, that federal requirement. Based on Title VI requirements, we've set up certain criteria. So although it might be a great advertising corner, from that perspective, if it doesn't meet the operational requirements that we put in there, to be sure, and some of those are just based on total volume of buses that go by and passengers at that stop, kind of this hierarchy. If it doesn't mesh with that hierarchy, we're not going to compromise just because they want to put a shelter there, because we need to be sensitive that we have an equality of shelters throughout the city.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, David?
Rick, this is getting off the subject just a little bit, but COPTA has already decided to have a study performed with respect to the bus routes. Is that correct?
That's correct. On December the 14th, the trustees approved that contract to do that study that has been talked about here on council.
And we don't know what that study may recommend, but what could happen is that they may recommend changing the existing routes and maybe even perhaps reducing the service area in an effort to increase the volume of service to certain areas that may see a lot of ridership take place. So one thing that these vendors all are subject to is the risk of losing a bus route based upon where they currently have furniture or at least the bus bench. So, you know, they do run some risk being in partners with the city or with COPTA in this regard. And like with anything, you'd hope to have a return on your investment to help compensate that risk of loss of revenue. because we are not under any requirement to take into consideration the investments that they currently have in determining what the appropriate bus routes are. Is that correct?
No, you're correct in everything you said, which is another reason why, when we've had this ongoing dialogue now for some time about how do we look at our system and are there enhancements we can make, whether we continue to fund at the current level or we fund at an increased level, not knowing those decisions and those recommendations and ultimately what not only the COTPA trustees would like to do, but certainly you as City Council, is another reason that we've kind of held off putting anything new out there, because there is that risk that you've voiced.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Rick, what do you think the cost of a bus bench is? Some concrete and 4 2x4?
$500 or so will get you a bus bench.
So at
Now, it could be a little bit more for the pad. That's a much smaller pad, but
So $100 a month, that's $1,200 a year. So that's $350 significant. That's a pretty significant return on investment, correct?
yeah, I think the one thing we do, what I don't know is exactly what it would take from a maintenance standpoint in terms of your staffing out there, and of course that's a function of how many benches you have, but there is a much faster payback on those than there is on shelters.
Thank you.
All right, ready to vote on 8B? All right. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8C is a public hearing. This is the budget amendment on the public safety sales tax. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on item 8C? All right, we have a motion and a second. Comments or questions from council? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8D is some program requirements for the MAPS 3 transit project.
Mike Myers is here to do a brief explanation of the project requirements.
All right.
Mayor, council members, thank you. We don't have a PowerPoint presentation for you today, but I can give you a summary of the process that we've gone through and the major points that are involved in this project requirements document. We've done project requirements documents for all of the other projects. You've seen those. This project requirements document is a little bit different than some of the other ones that you've seen. It deals with just one phase of the streetcar process, and that's the investigation and standards phase, which is the first phase of the streetcar process. The reason it doesn't include some of the other phases is that there are still some things that we don't know yet. For example, we don't know what the propulsion system is going to be. We don't know what the rail type is going to be. We don't know what the final route is going to be. Part of the investigation standards piece involves Jacobs Engineering, which was hired to do the investigative standards. You've approved that contract for them. These questions will in part be answered during this investigation standards piece. At the point in time where their recommendations or options are made known and the City Council approves those, the project requirements will be modified to reflect the information that is developed during this investigative standards phase by Jacobs Engineering. We've spent a little more than 3 months working with the subcommittee very closely on developing this document. We've had input from Rick Kane. We've had input from a number of the subcommittee members. At their meeting last month, they approved for recommendation to the advisory board this project requirements document. The advisory board has approved it for recommendation to City Council. Some of the things that I think are important to note are that the document requires that Jacobs, during this process, continues to coordinate with other MAPS 3 projects, that it continues to coordinate with COTPA and other agencies that may have some impact on the streetcar. It asks Jacobs to It requires that there be some study of operations and maintenance costs related to the various propulsion types and those kinds of things. It asks that they consider different delivery methods, whether it would be the standard design, bid, build, or what and some people think is the industry standard, which would be a design build where a single contractor would be responsible both for the design, the implementation, construction, and even operation. No recommendations regarding that have been made yet. That will be part of what comes out of Jacobs' final work product. We're going to continue to consider federal requirements as we go forward. I think right now we're of the belief that federal assistance is the chances for federal assistance for this first phase or first couple of phases of the streetcar are pretty slim. But one other item is that we're going to consider coordination of efforts with the hub relative to street improvements adjacent to the hub and to the potential for light rail in the Adventure District. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
Yeah, Ed?
Can you talk about the public meeting process that's going to take place over the next few months?
Jacobs is in the process of developing those public meetings and the timing of those and the agenda for those. We expect those to happen within the next couple of months. Jacobs owes us a response with respect to the schedule for that and the agenda for those meetings within the next few weeks.
But there is planned to be, I thought there was one even this month, as early as this month, to start talking about the route, and is that your understanding?
I don't know specifically when the public meetings are scheduled.
I want to, and I was going to express these comments at the last meeting. I stayed for the first 2 hours, and then I had a conflict, so I didn't get to make my comments, so I'll make them here. I have concerns about the route verification portion, which basically says verify the subcommittee's preferred route. In that meeting, I noticed, and I have noticed, a similar process. It was a similar process that we saw in the Boulevard, where we get, there's this IKEA effect, where those who come up with a plan, who are emotionally invested in a plan, become resistant to its change or alteration. And I think we saw that in the original Boulevard concept. I think maybe we're seeing it with the convention center site. We're seeing it with this locally preferred alternative, which had an alternatives analysis process, but then significant portions, when I read that, the primary ridership was going to be gained from interfacing from the transit, the bus transit system, and Health Science Center. Both of those are gone. So it truly is the subcommittee's locally preferred alternative. And nothing against the subcommittee, which I respect highly and tremendous, but it didn't go through the planning department for approval. It didn't go through COPTA for approval. It's the subcommittee's route. And I guess, we don't have to amend this as long as I can tell you unequivocally, my concerns, is that, to me, that is a starting point. And this makes it sound like that's the end point that we're going to verify. But that process started out trying to get federal funds, which I don't think is slim. I don't think the odds are slim. I think it's none at this point. So we have to decide what paradigm we're operating. Is it a ridership paradigm principally, or is it an economic development paradigm? And that can change things. And just like I think the convention center site was determined in a vacuum of what's best for the convention center as opposed to what's necessarily best for the city, I think this route was determined in a vacuum. What's the best route just for a streetcar, as opposed to how does it interface with all the other projects in the downtowns and cities development. So those, I think it's a different situation, and I just want this to be a starting point as opposed to an end point that we're verifying. And there was a lot of resistance in that meeting, incredulous even, that we would have public meetings, incredulous that we would have a new set of eyes look at this route. I think that we need diversity of thought. We need the maximum amount of people looking at that route. A.J. Kirkpatrick gave a presentation. He showed a lot of data with a lot of different variables. And then immediately on blogs, it was that the planning department had essentially virtually ratified the proposed streetcar route. But I didn't see that in the data at all. And A.J. Kirkpatrick certainly didn't say that. But that's the filter that I think it's being viewed from, is that there's this emotional attachment to the route. I think that the fundamental question that we're going to have to answer in the next few months is competing policy demands. And principally, I mean, there's a lot about a couplet and putting a couplet on two-way streets as opposed to one-way street and how far you are, and a lot of different things, but principally the Court Ashore plan and whether we're moving forward with that or not. And if we are moving forward with the development of Court Ashore, you could make the argument to me that we're doing this decades too early, it's too ambitious, the south side of the park, it's not going to work, and so maybe we should pull back and not do the Court Ashore, and we could have that argument. But if you are going to do Court Ashore, if you're going to go forward, it really demands, why would you do that and not use the most powerful real estate development tool that you have, which is the streetcar? And so that, I hope, Jacobs really takes a look, and that hasn't been analyzed in this. So when we say verify the subcommittee's preferred route, that really wasn't addressed. And so having the streetcar route come down Robinson along the park, or even perhaps to Capitol Hill and smash that psychological barrier that the river has provided for decades between the north and the south sides of the city. But to have all of that be taken a look at, we have to decide, if we're going to do Court Ashore, then we'd have to answer why we're not going to use the streetcar to make that happen. And then finally, I hope Jacobs answers, and I didn't see it in here. We talked about a few things about the route and its interface with the intermodal hub, but not with the bus system. We have to analyze the interfacing with the rest of the transit network, and that is not included in here, and we don't have to amend it as long as we have an agreement and an understanding that they will talk about the whole development of the whole transit network.
Well, with respect to your last point first, that's part of the interface with COTPA that's been anticipated. COTPA's been involved in a lot of the meetings. We do understand that there should be some interface with COTPA with respect to bus routes, and Jacobs is going to look at that. With respect to your other concerns, I think all of those concerns have been expressed to Jacobs in the most clear terms we possibly can. Jacobs has been involved in a number of meetings with the designers of the convention center, with the designers for the park, with the Alliance for Economic Development. Currently has a study going on about economic development around the Court Ashore area. Jacobs has been involved in conversations with all of those people. There are additional meetings planned to provide coordination. But Jacobs has been told, and Jacobs has hired an economic development impact subconsultant to look at the economic development impact of the transit and to not just assume that the route that was the LPA is the final route. They are looking at other alternatives. So it is, I don't know that I'd call it a brand new starting point, but they are looking at the current route, preferred route, and analyzing it as well as other potential routes.
You know, I don't know if we're going to see the presentation that A.J. Kirkpatrick did here from the planning department.
I've seen it several times. It's a great presentation.
But would you agree that he did not say and has not said that it verifies the locally preferred alternative route.
I would agree that he did not say that.
And you could look at that data, and you could make an argument for multiple routes. I mean, it doesn't. I look at that data, and I could make an argument that a portion should go east-west. I mean, I could envision it like a plus sign, where one route pings back and forth now north and south, and one pings back and forth east and west, whether it's Reno, Sheridan, the Boulevard, whatever. But I just want to be clear that we look at multiple, and that he did not say.
That kind of data will be utilized by Jacobs Consultant, Economic Development Impact Consultant, as they look at and analyze routes.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah, David?
I would just like to say I support Councilman Shadid's thoughts and comments. I hope we have not determined at this point what the route is or will be. Councilman Shadid's comments, I think, are very good, and I certainly support those ideas. The concept, for example, of using this new transit facility to help in the development of the southern portion of the park, I mean, I'd love to see it go beyond that south, but just to go to the southern portion of the park, I think would be very beneficial with respect to development in association with the development of that park, to see housing and other types of development grow along the southern part of the park and the river would be great. Also, if we are successful in getting a retail plaza developed alongside of the convention center, to use this transit authority to assist in developing that retail plaza. I think there's just a lot of opportunities beyond what the current route suggests that we could utilize this to make this a terrific new area to focus on from a development standpoint. So I appreciate Councilman Shadid's comments and just wanted to voice my support for those ideas. Thank you.
Pete?
I also want to support the idea that we have public meetings. I think what we've accomplished with the Boulevard goes without saying, the value of having public input. I don't think the Boulevard would be what it's going to be had we not done that. And I think the same thing's true about the rail system. I think we'll find some really good benefit. And you know, even if I look at the Boulevard and I think there's going to be a group of people that are not going to be happy with the way it works out. But the fact that we went through the process made the system much better than it would have been had we not gone through the process. So however it works out, I think, and there may be some of us here on the Horseshoe that don't agree with the final solution that comes from the Boulevard, but where I think we'll be unanimous in agreeing that the process, it's a better Boulevard than it would have been otherwise. And I think the same thing will be true about the rail system. There are so many competing ideas about what it should do and what it could do. I know I've had one that it needs to go someplace. You know, it needs to go somewhere where it can take people from one point to another, not just a tourist kind of a thing. There's so many things that need to be vetted, and I think vetting them in a public meeting similar to the meetings that we've had with the Boulevard is going to be a very important process. I personally would like to know whether or not there would be sufficient funds to do a small loop downtown that would tie the projects that we're talking about, the park, the convention center, perhaps the civic center, the memorial, just a small loop downtown, and then the rest of it be to fund the Adventure Line as part of this whole project, and fund and do the first stages of the hub, which I think over the long term may be the most valuable piece of what we do with regard to it, is making that hub work. There's still lots of room for lots of ideas out there that I think, all of which are obviously not going to be able to be accomplished, but there's a lot of them that need to be vetted publicly, and public meetings are by far the best way to do that. And I appreciate the fact that you've got them on your radar.
Hey, Gary?
Just a quick comment. The year that I served as the council sit-in with, I don't think I ever heard Mike and his group or city staff reference that the route was locked in. I just don't think that ever happened. I'll tell you that I think there was people on that committee that thought it was, and still does probably. But I too support the fact that I get two predominant comments about the transit, the streetcar, from people that come up and talk to me. And one of them was answered in the fact that the citizens voted we're going to do it, period. The second one is, who determined, what professional group or what professional study determined where the route ought to go? And I don't have a good answer for that one. If there was no MAPS 3 projects at all, if we just decided we were going to do a streetcar in Oklahoma City, we'd use a combination of city staff, city trust and commissions, and professional consultants that we would hire to tell us where they thought the best route would be. And then we may do a public process of saying, okay, here's what's being recommended to us. Do you have any comments? It seems like the opposite has happened, and then that some public entity has determined where they think it needs to be, and it's kind of driving that way through the committee process, and city staff seems to be reluctant to stand in the way of it and so forth. So I too want to register my support for the fact that this, the project requirements, the study that's going to be done needs to take a look at it from square one in the way that we would do any other multi-million-dollar project in Oklahoma City. And I feel confident that Mike understands that, and hopefully staff and the committee and all the rest of them are getting the message at this point in time.
Meg?
If I could, just two quick comments. We talked briefly about the alternatives analysis study that went sort of parallel to this process. There was an awful lot of public input at that time, and I'm not suggesting we're done, but I attended meetings early on where we sat at round tables and everybody had dots and pencils, and people provided a ton of input that was gathered by the alternatives analysis group. So to suggest that there hasn't been a lot of public input, I think is not completely legitimate. We need to have a lot more. And I concur completely with Pete that the process over the boulevard, demonstrates how we end up with a better project by making it as public as possible. So I also support it, but we have had a fair amount of public input already. And my second comment is from time to time, I think we continue to confuse some of the different modes of transit. When we're talking about the streetcar circulator versus, for instance, the Adventure District, which is a light rail system rather than this streetcar. And so, I think there's a big dream out there to be able to incorporate all these different modes of transit that, might include rapid rail transit cross-country at some point and would include light rail. But light rail is a different thing than the modern streetcar that we approved in MAPS. And so I just want to make sure we're not mixing apples and oranges.
Okay. Skip?
That was my concern, that knowing this whole issue of the park, the other development as part of MAPS, but the streetcar is related to the boat. Was it limited to exactly a defined streetcar, or are we in a position that we can define what is a streetcar, as Councilwoman Salyer just stated, that makes it possible to go to the Adventure District by way of some type of...
Yeah, I can answer that. The resolution that we passed related to the MAPS 3 vote specifically included language that would allow us to fund a rail transit system to go to Midwest City, Del City, that route that was somehow presented to us at the time, or the Adventure District. We wanted to put language in there that would allow creativity down the line that was not available to us at the time of the vote in the summer of 2009 when we were discussing all these things. So I think the language was very carefully crafted to give us options. But I think the intent was to make sure that we build the downtown streetcar as a circulator system for downtown. But we didn't necessarily know how many dollars it was going to take and who the other partners might be on these other rail-based systems. But we wanted to make sure that MAPS 3 dollars could be used in that regard, because the city didn't seem to have any funding sources for those systems any other way.
If I could further that just for a second, $130 million budget. It was anticipated that it was $120 million for the downtown modern streetcar and $10 million for the hub and other matches along those lines. That being said, that was anticipated, and the council has the right to change that if they choose to do so, but that was what was put out there at that point in time, was 120 and the 10.
Right, with the idea that if we did spend, let's round number, $10 million to do something on the Adventure line or the line toward Tinker, that would have to come out of the streetcar budget. I mean, we'd have less to do somewhere else. But at least the language was there, so we'd have those options.
And we were trying at that time, and still are, I think, looking at the possibility of maximizing those and leveraging those with some federal dollars to make both the downtown and other transportation projects go further.
Yeah, Larry?
Well, I was on the first year when the subcommittees got started, and Mike, maybe my recollection is a little bit fuzzy, but the streetcar people were kind of given the economic parameters, were they not, of $10 million for the hub and $120 million for the streetcar.
That's correct.
And they were told, in effect, I thought, to try to design the best streetcar system that could be designed for $120 million.
I think that's correct.
And that was their focus. And the figure that I can remember coming back was that would fund in the area of between 6 and 7 miles of in-street rail streetcar system, and they were kind of focused on where could they best run 6 to 7 miles of rail to accomplish that.
I believe the implementation plan calls for 5 to 6 miles or anticipates, but yes, that's generally that's what was what advice was given to the subcommittee.
And so they took that and they were looking at, should they run this street or this street, should they run couplets or single line or like that, based on those economic parameters.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
But I think that one of the issues that I haven't had a lot of information that already exists in some of the lines that we already have that I don't think was well vetted in the process of determining this 5 or 6 mile as far as the best use of the funding that we would have from the maps, and that if you have lines that are already established, that eliminates a major cost in reference to considering where you want to go and for what purpose you would get, the return that you would receive from a transportation type of connection. And when you look at the Adventure District, and that's northeast Oklahoma City up to the zoo, for those who have a problem understanding the Adventure area that we're referencing to, we have a lot of assets that are already in place that I think is very worthy of taking a mindful consideration of.
And I think all these comments are reflective of the fact that we had this investigative standards phase as part of the process. We actually extended this investigative standards phase to cover at least 2 years, in large part to answer a lot of these questions. A lot of things have changed in downtown, in the Adventure District, and this investigative standards phase gives us the opportunity to have Jacobs look at what's changed and look at what can be done differently to optimize the $130 million that is a part of the MAPS 3 money.
Yeah. At some point, though, we got to pick a propulsion, we got to pick a fuel, we got to pick a route. And we could debate all 3 of those issues for years and decades to come. And I think there's an expectation from the citizens that we're going to figure that part out and go. And we'll get it as right as we can. But all three of those could be infinitely debated. And I think the subcommittee has a timeline in mind, and I don't think they have hidden agendas in place. And I'm at this point, I have confidence in them and are following their lead. Any other comments? Okay. Mike, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second on item 8D. Francis is shaking her head, we don't. But we do now. All right, so cast your votes. It passes unanimously. We're on to item 8E, and I understand we do not need executive session on this item. That's correct. Motion and second then? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8F, I understand we do not need executive session. All right, motion. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And item 8G, I understand there's no new information here. We don't need an executive session. Okay, cast your votes. It's struck. Item 8H is claims recommended for denial. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under any item listed under 8H? Looks like someone has showed up. Okay. Wilma Pendleton? Good morning, and thanks for your patience with us. We will need your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Wilma J. Pendleton. I live at 505 Northeast 61st Street in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Okay. And our microphones are such that you probably have to pull it in front of you to speak. And then if she needs to speak, you can move it over there.
All right.
All right. Which item are you here to speak on?
H. Little H.
H.
H1H.
Okay.
Okay. I submitted a claim on December the 1st, 2010. I lost my smile. I come down to the Oklahoma courthouse and fell on the sidewalk and fell and busted my upper four front teeth, injured my right knee, and had I not had sunglasses on, I would have lost my eyesight. And I just submitted the claim. First of all, I don't have health insurance, so I was not aware of the fact that I could even file a claim with the city. So I took it upon myself to try to pay for my work to be done at the OU Dental Clinic, and I've been working with them since September of 2011. And they started, and when they started the process, they found that I had more damage than I thought I had. And over that point of time, it's taken from September of 2010 up until December, probably the 15th, I finally got my smile back. They were able to fix it, but I still have, and still suffer from other injuries that's caused from that. But I'm just here on behalf of myself and anyone else that's going to walk over that curve down there that's going to fall and break something. And I just wanted to point out to you guys that it has been hard, going through this, just trying to get things done to try to get the teeth fixed and things, And I've had to pay for this out of pocket myself, of course. And we'll continue to do that, if necessary. But I just need to make sure that you guys get that curve fixed and everything, and just hope no one else has to go through what I've gone through in the past couple of years.
Okay. I don't think there's an issue probably of the amount of the claim as much as there is the city's exposure on the fault of the claim.
Good morning. Amy Harrison, Municipal Counselor's Office. The issue with this claim, the legal issue, is that it happened more than 1 year prior to the date the claim was filed, which under the Governmental Tort Claims Act bars it under a statute of limitations of 1 year. So it's a denial.
So your advice to the council is that because of state law, the council cannot consider this claim because it was not filed within the time frame that they described?
Within 1 year, that is correct.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Let me say, my name is Stephanie Colbert. I am here as really support for Ms. Pendleton. I'm an attorney, not here really in my capacity as an attorney. We take a water aerobics class together, and when Ms. Pendleton told me what happened, I said, have you filed a claim? And she said she didn't know. And, of course, as she said, if she had insurance, she doesn't have insurance. And had she had insurance, as we all know, the insurance company would have made sure that she complied with the, whatever the requirements of the city, of the Torts Claim Act are. However, she didn't and she wasn't able to. As she's indicated, if you looked, I don't know if you guys have copies of her claim, but if you look the city street, it's in terrible condition. The only question I agree with council is the question of time of filing, and I think that she filed when she knew it and when she knew the extent of her injuries. And if you look at it from that perspective, and if you look at it from the perspective of fairness and trying to protect the citizens of the city of Oklahoma City, we just ask you to look at it from that perspective and consider the letter we received said that the recommendation was going to be denial, but it was up to you guys. And since it's up to you guys, that's why we're here appealing to you all with respect to the denial.
Well, let me ask about the discussion. Is it your legal opinion that the council has discretion whether or not to pay this claim?
Not on this one. On the date of the incident, the claim form states that she broke 4 teeth when it occurred, indicating that she knew that there was damage that needed to be addressed. And that's the first date of damage.
Okay.
When did the incident happen?
December 1st, 2010.
And the claim was filed when?
It was received on November 29, 2012.
And as she indicated, she just was able to get the funds together to get her teeth fixed and get all the as she indicated, there was more damage than she even had an idea with, and would have lost her eyesight had she not had on glasses.
Is it Ms. Colbert?
Yes.
Are you an attorney?
I am.
So at the time that you had knowledge of her injuries was before the 2012 year?
No, it was this year. That's what I'm saying. We take a water workers class together, and that we were talking one day. It was just a couple of months ago, and that's when, and she immediately called the city, got the claim form sent to her, and all of that, because we just said, well, you need to call the city and find out what you need to do, and that's when she did it. It wasn't, this has been the last couple of months.
Okay.
So she's taken pictures of the city street, and she's gotten pictures of her dental work, she got an estimate, all that kind of stuff. And that, she did that relatively quickly. If she had known, she would have done it as quickly when the injury occurred.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, with several of us on the council who are members of the bar who have had to represent people as relates to injuries, it's one thing that we know we can't do, and that's supersede any issue that is barred by the statute of limitations. And so the fact that, the fairness issue, unfortunately, we can't put ourselves in a legal situation of being sued by approving something that is barred by law, by the statute of limitations. And I empathize with Ms. Pillington. Unfortunately, 2 years, would definitely exceed any degree of trying to even find a exception to the statute of limitations as far as a municipal tort claim. And so, Ms. Pillington, I too have experienced some of the stumbles and haven't literally failed on some of these, areas, but I sincerely apologize for your, and empathize with you in reference to your injuries, but, I know you live in Ward 7, and I'm making the comments because I represent your area, and as a citizen, I just want you to know that this is just unfortunately that the timing of it is beyond our control, and legally we just can't do anything. But the statute states that it's a 1-year time frame. It was filed 2 years almost after the time frame, the incident date.
Yeah. you understand our legal situation.
Well, I would argue, certainly, I'm an attorney, used to arguing, understand what you all's perception of, certainly the loss, I don't have any quarrel or qualm with the fact that the denial has occurred based upon what the Tort Act says. However, I think that there is discretion that you do have. And I think that if you argue that the way the statute says is within 1 year of the date the loss occurs, and I would argue that she knew it's been within 1 year of her knowledge of what she could do based upon how when the loss occurred and when she was fully aware of what her injuries were. Certainly, it's within 1 year of when she was fully aware of what her injuries were.
Well, maybe it should work that way, but I don't think it does work that way. And we're all, I know as a group, sympathetic to what happened and wish it didn't happen and wish we could do something. We just wish we could at least consider it. But as you heard our legal counsel advise us, we cannot consider it.
Okay. We appreciate that and understand that. The final thing that I would say is please get the street fixed.
Okay.
That is your responsibility, and it is the responsibility of the city of Oklahoma City. And, you know, 2 years after her injury, the damage to the street still exists. The parking garage across the street, the personnel there has indicated that has been that way for quite a while. People have fallen. Probably other people didn't know they had the right to file claims, and perhaps had they done so, perhaps it would be fixed. So if Ms. Pendleton is not able to recover, at least I think the city of Oklahoma City has an obligation to permanently fix that area because it's in terrible shape. If you look at the pictures, or if you all ever have an opportunity to look at the pictures, you can see, or if you ever walk down by the courthouse, you know the condition of the streets. So thank you very much.
Thank you for coming down. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the claims recommended for denial. Any other comments or questions? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Let's just send to items from council. Gary, anything today? Ed?
I want to just also address something that was at the Transit Subcommittee and we heard about it a little bit 2 weeks ago as well, is the E.K. Gaylord portion of Project 180 and its interfacing with the Santa Fe Hub and the streetcar system. And again, I had to leave after 2 hours, so I'll give my comments here. I guess the subcommittee hired it to be videotaped, and our Public Works Director was subjected to a relentless beratement of criticism of moving forward with Project 180 changes on E.K. Gaylord prior to the streetcar construction. And I just want to give a response. You know, Jeff Speck identified this as one of the worst areas for pedestrians in the city. And this intersection here is at Main. This will be north of what we addressed, but it's just an example of what's been done over the decades. Can you go to the next? These are the steps that lead up to the Santa Fe station. And that's the sidewalk that our pedestrians and our citizens have to navigate, with cars moving easily 40, 45 miles an hour right next to them. So you have a Public Works Director who is publicly advocating for Project 180 requirements to be, or standards, to be applied to this street, the most ill-conceived, God-forsaken, auto-centric street in the whole city. I mean, it's historic. What he is advocating, he is saying that you would take these streets down from 13 feet to 11 feet, that you would potentially sacrifice a lane and go from 7 lanes to 6 lanes, that median there, which is as wide as 10 feet, could be gone. So you're talking about if you have 7 lanes and you take away 2 feet on each one, that's 14 feet. Take away 10 feet at a median, that's another 10 feet. Take away a lane, that's 11 feet. You're talking about a Public Works Director advocating to take 35 feet of right-of-way and give it to pedestrians, placemaking, and transit. That is historic. That's a victory. If you are a transit advocate, placemaking advocate, walkability advocate, to hear the Public Works Director publicly advocate, that is heaven. It's so exciting, and it's victory. And he doesn't deserve beratement for that. he deserves wide applause. And this didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, from the Horseshoe, Pete, Meg, we've all talked about we've got to protect the pedestrians, sometimes thousands after Thunder games. We've got to protect them. And we cannot wait years to protect them. We've had, in the last 12 months, 3 pedestrians and 1 bicyclist hit by cars along this corridor. It's very, very dangerous. And so to take that right away, we take it. We should remember that we built $1 million ramp for the arena on I-40, and then we tore it down. That was $1 million. So to do these streets, put them in panels so that you can easily, and it's not all wasted. You go down, you identify the utilities, now you know exactly where they are, how deep they are. It helps you design your streetcar system. You put a padding down, and then you put, all that is going to help you with your streetcar construction. Can you go to the next one? This is what we have right now. This is with the pedestrians. There's a gate there, which would tell me as a pedestrian, am I supposed to be here or not? There's a gate there. There's this huge trash bin. Am I supposed to take my kids and walk around between the trash bin and the wall there? I mean, this is highly pedestrian unfriendly. Can you go to the next one? Next one. This is what it should look like for it to move sometimes thousands of people, where it's all at street level there. Go to the next one. This is what it should not look like, where you force all the pedestrians into the one place that's, and then you have this bump up for no reason. So that needs to go. And we'll do that, as we'll do it right now as part of Project 180. Can you go to the next one? Same thing there. You're just forcing all the people into this, 4 feet, and as opposed to the whole thing being at street level. Go to the next one. And then we're going to get a chance to make upgraded bus stops. And you don't have enough right-of-way there for a transit hub. You need the right-of-way. And so I just want to emphasize my strong appreciation of what the city, what Public Works is doing, and that we move forward as fast as possible. And just encourage everyone, I believe the firm is Tetra Tech is going to be doing a study over the next 3 weeks. If you have concerns or you have ideas of how this could be improved, put them in writing. If the transit subcommittee has concerns and has ideas, put them in writing and submit them to us now and incorporate those ideas into the design. At this point, we don't even have a finalized streetscape, so it's premature to criticize. Thanks.
Larry? Pete?
I just want to make a comment about the passing of Patience Ladding. Oklahoma City lost a true long-time leader with her passing this past week. She's my connection to her was that she appointed me to the Planning Commission in 1979. So I've never doubted her acumen with regard to making quality decisions for the city. But she broke through the ice of women's involvement in politics in Oklahoma City in a way that it's extremely important. I mean, she served as a Ward 2 councilman, first woman mayor of a large city in the United States, was a pillar, a paragon of integrity. The whole time she was on the council and the mayor, she brought a new era to Oklahoma City government, and we lost a true heroine in Oklahoma City's history, and especially the city of municipal government. I appreciate the fact that we're going to fly the flags at half-staff, and that she will be here on Thursday in the downstairs, which I think is a very signal honor to do that, and I appreciate the mayor doing that.
Well, I do believe it's unprecedented, and just to follow up on Pete, we will have Mayor Ladding's body and casket in the City Council second floor chambers Thursday afternoon, and we invite citizens to come down and to pay their respects to, as Pete said, a true legend for our generation and a role model for so many of us. David?
Well, I'd like to continue on the discussion with Mayor Ladding. She was, I truly admire her. She showed a lot of courage in running for office And for those who may not be aware of the situation on the council at the time, it was not as pleasant as what it is today. And she always conducted herself as a lady, as a professional person, and we really lost a great statesperson in Mayor Ladding. And again, I think she was a great example, not just for women, but for all people who are involved in public office, as to how to conduct yourself, how to lead a government body, and she will certainly be missed. Thank you.
Meg?
I guess I'd also like to just express my condolences to the family. Patience was not only a terrific role model, but she also was for many years my neighbor in Edgemere, and was just a fabulous neighbor as well as everything else. So she truly will be missed, and I want to thank you as well for the honor of tomorrow. Hope everybody will come down to pay their respects. And I guess I'd also like to just wish everybody a Happy New Year. We're embarking on 2013 is going to be a huge year for the city and for all of us, and so I just want to wish everybody a prosperous 2013 and ask for their help as we move forward with, not completion, but move forward with, working on all of these great projects that we have underway. Thank you.
Skip.
Mayor, I would just like to thank you and the council itself as it relates to Mayor Ladding and naming the Northwest Library, and that she had an opportunity to see that and prior to her passing, and that the discussions that you had to announce to her that we were naming the Northwest Library, the Mayor Patient Ladding Library, I think is a great visionary thought on your part and the city manager, and of course with the support of our council. So, and again, ditto on everything else everyone else has said in reference to her being a trailblazer as it relates to diversity in city government, and especially in a city of this size. So, thank you.
All right, city manager reports.
Well, contrary to popular belief, Eric is not all about walkability. He also has to do some dealings with traffic issues out there in vehicular. So he's going to talk to us a little bit this morning about our intelligent transportation system.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Mayor, and Council. I appreciate the kind words. Today, as part of the City Manager Report, we have an ITS update. This is Intelligent Transportation System, something that I think that we've discussed in the past, something that's an ongoing project, but we've got a lot of good successes to share with you today, and also to talk about the future of ITS. I want to give my thanks to staff. I've also got Dennis Haken with me here in the audience today. He's the project manager for Public Works, who many of you may have worked with in the past, but he is a traffic engineer and is overseeing the implementation of the project. If you recall, as a project purpose, this is a 2007 bond issue project that was actually initiated in the 2000 bond issue. There were 3 corridors in the 2000 bond issue. There's 18 corridors in the 2007. The cost of the program is about $12 million. Work is underway. When we look at the description, you'll see here there's 321 intersections that are affected by those 18 corridors. You'll also see that we are actually able to complete those corridors under budget. And one of the reasons that that's going to be made possible, the original budget included wiring the intersections, but we're able to take advantage of Wi-Fi or wireless technologies. Since we don't have to bury that cable, there's a significant savings, millions of dollars, that are going to allow us to propose to you today expanding the ITS to all 700 intersections in Oklahoma City. So utilizing the remaining funds, that is part of the proposal today. This was an item that did come before council here just this past December. I'm expanding that project. But again, as a part of the update, there's 3 major components to the ITS. There's the communication system, the system software and hardware, and also the central office equipment. This is a map of Oklahoma City, which we're most familiar with. You'll see the intersections identified with the red triangles. You'll see the 18 corridors identified with the green line segments. You know, a lot of questions will come up about the corridors, and I'll get into a little bit of discussion. we're not able to corridor every street in Oklahoma City. What you can't do is compete every street. The idea with a corridor is that when you hit a green light on a particular street, that you will have successive green lights that decrease your travel time. But obviously, as we look at major arterials, and you'll see many of those that are shown here, we can affect some, but we can't always do those on all the cross streets. So there is going to be some traffic on the minor streets that are going to still wait at red lights, but we're enhancing a lot of the traffic throughout Oklahoma City. This is a funding summary that you'll find here. This was the $12 million that was identified as a part of the 2007 bond issue. There were some unlisted funds that were spent, so the total budget's about $12.3 million. When we talk about the project benefits, we're talking about reducing travel time, emissions from vehicles, reducing gasoline consumption, and then of course it's an opportunity to replace a lot of our antiquated equipment. The original project goal was to reduce travel times by about 5%. And if you look at the notes that I have here at the bottom of the page, you'll see that when we look at a typical 40-minute round-trip commute using just average cost of gasoline, an estimated $280 a year can be saved by a commuter. We actually did go out and do a study at Classen. You'll see that the northbound and the southbound were tracked, but I'll draw your attention to the right-hand column. Before ITS and after ITS, you'll see that there was nearly a 70-second savings, so a little over a minute, which actually achieved about a 6% savings of time. So the goals were exceeded. At 6%, if we recalculate that, again, there's about 83 hours of savings versus the 70, and again, using average cost of gasoline, we expect that a typical commuter may save as much as $332 a year. So where have we been? So the project timeline, we're in year 3 of a 5-year project. Many corridors have been completed. NASTEC is the contractor for the project. They're the ones that are doing the installations throughout the city. As we work to move forward, there's 321 intersections that are online. 14 of the 18 original corridors are completed. We are now completing the purchases for the remainder of the equipment for the system. When we look at an intersection in Oklahoma City, this isn't something that you're going to see huge changes when you pull up as you see today. I mean, the signal lights don't change. The thing that I'll draw your attention to on the left-hand side of the page is the traffic controller box. It's the aluminum-colored box that's on the side. It's the equipment that's inside that box where all the upgrades are being made. So inside there, of course, is computer-controlled equipment. Because it's connected via Wi-Fi, we have the ability to monitor these remotely here downtown. So instead of having to wait for a call to come in that says a signal is out, we're able to know the signals are out real time. You'll also see on the lower left, this is the Wi-Fi antennas that are being installed throughout the city to make sure that we've got coverage throughout. And again, we will still have to make service calls to the cabinets when there is a problem. But again, the advance notice on our ability to send new timing instructions to the cabinets, we can do that all remotely now. This is what the central office looks like. For many that might have visited Public Works, we used to have an old traffic controller board. We still own that, but it has a lot of lights on it, and it would tell you when the lights were red or green or yellow here downtown. It was just a downtown traffic board. It stood about 7 feet tall and was probably about 7 feet wide. Kind of a neat piece of Oklahoma City history. But today, using large screen monitors, or actually TV screens, we can monitor all 700 intersections from one location. We can send, again, the timings. So if we have event traffic in Oklahoma City and we need to temporarily change the timing, if we were to have a particular delay that was being observed, we could temporarily change those and return those back to a normal red light, green light, yellow light as needed. So in summary, we've got the 18 corridors that are going to be completed. We're now ready to implement the remaining intersections using the original budget identified in the 2007 bond issue. We can complete all this work by 2014. So in December of this past month, the council did authorize to proceed, and so we're now working diligently forward to make that happen. And again, the significant savings is going to be realized, and obviously tremendous savings to Oklahoma City, the residents, the commuters of Oklahoma City, our ability to monitor and manage traffic signals and corridors throughout downtown and into our suburban areas. With that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
All right. Gary?
Kind of a side issue, and you may have to brief me on it later. Years ago, we began installing traffic preemption systems on some of the signals for the public safety vehicles to trigger them Does that system still work when you upgrade the intersection to this system? Or are we phasing that out, or are we growing it any at all?
So the new system does have those capabilities. Yes, we still have that capability, and I think there's probably some enhanced functions because of the computerized nature of the new systems that we can take advantage of. So the things that we could do in the past, we can continue in the future. I think we'll also have some new opportunities that we can offer public safety as well.
Just a related question. How can you also interface with the transit system to optimize transit? Can you, with the systems that are being installed on the buses, so perhaps that the buses just get a straight shot to optimize their travel times?
I think it would just be a matter of furthering like the public safety system into buses if we chose to do that. Right now they operate just on a typical signal light like the regular automobiles in the city grid would. We would just need to have a discussion about that. It would be possible to do that if that was the desire.
We anticipate there'll probably be a recommendation that comes out of the transit sub-consultant is to have some type of coordination on that. I'm sure we'll be integrating that at the time.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing that we're going to see is instead of us having to do manual entry of time into the cabinets that I showed you, where we have to actually go out into the field, make some changes, visually watch them, we have the ability now to do that remotely. We can send some changes to a cabinet and make some changes. If they don't work, we can change them right back, and it doesn't require us to be at all 700 locations at once. We can do that from a central office. Huge benefits there.
Larry?
Yeah, philosophical question, Eric, if you help me out. On a corridor, the system is set up to minimize the delays of the people that are going on the corridor as opposed to the people that are coming in on a cross street. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct.
And so if I'm coming in on a cross street and I come up to the light, in the past I assumed that if there was no traffic going on the corridor street, that the light would change right there for me and I'd immediately be able to enter into the corridor. That capability is no longer going to be apparent. Is that true?
No, it retains, and so there's still a detector that will detect a car on the cross street that's waiting at a red light. We will program that controller to make sure that the majority of the traffic has moved through the intersection as needed, but it will turn the light and allow that car to enter onto the arterial street and into the corridor.
So if I come up if I have a particular street that I use all the time, a citizen brought this to my attention, and it appears that it's that tripping it when the traffic is not on the corridor is not happening. Who do I need to call to ask a question and say, hey, how come I'm always having to sit here for what I think is an extended period of time?
We'd ask them to contact the Public Works Department. We'd look into that to make sure there's not a malfunction of the signal.
Or the Action Center.
Excuse me?
Or the Action Center.
Would the Action Center be a better place to go or to?
Action Center or Public Works, either one's fine. I mean, we take calls both ways.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for Eric? All right. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I do want to comment on the sales tax report. The sales tax report is for December, so let's talk about what that period is. We get the December sales tax check about the first week in December. So this is for sales that occurred in late October and early November. So when you say, oh, the December check, is that Christmas? No, this is not Christmas. This is late October and early November. It was interesting. It was a pretty strong check. It was 6.7% over target and 9.9%, just under 10% over last year. So a very strong check for us. Over target, we're about $1 million, which is a good number, until you look at the use tax report. And the use tax report, which has been a little more volatile, was down about $700,000. So overall, it was still good. I'm not trying to be negative about this at all, but the use tax was down a little bit, both from prior year and from target, probably partly because last year was strong because of some of the use tax that was being acquired from the Devon Tower construction at that point in time. And so it's not a negative, but you just need to take a look at the sales tax report in totality as you review it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We're not going to fall then.
I'm sorry?
We're not going to fall, right?
No, I think we're okay. But you know,
we're on solid ground.
There's a lot of issues that are out there, including the Washington's actions yesterday.
Right.
May I ask you, and I know it's hard to predict what may happen in Congress, but any updates or ideas as to what may happen with respect to use tax being collected on internet sales?
Yes, on the Marketplace Fairness Act, which has been discussed. Actually, there was a movement to add that into the defense bill right around Christmas time, and it didn't happen. So I don't know. There's more movement on this bill than there has been in the past, and so I'm guardedly optimistic. But it's handicapping what Congress is going to do is hard to do at this point.
I would agree with that comment. And the thing that I find surprising is people who are knowledgeable about taxes still think of this at times as this being a new tax. The tax is already in place. It's got to be careful. It's a means to assist individual taxpayers, if nothing else, to pay the tax that they owe already.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That was well stated, Councilman, and that is exactly the case. It is not a new tax. There is an obligation for that tax presently. It's a loophole that isn't being filled. I think it was Councilman Shadid that asked for us to do a report on that at Council, and so we're preparing something within the next couple of weeks to bring back and talk about use tax and what should be reported and such, so that we will be doing something in response to that next couple of weeks.
Do you have an estimate of about how much money, if that were to pass Congress, how much money would come to the city or that the city is losing?
We don't know for sure. It appears to probably, it could be as much as $15 million or more.
Yeah.
Larry?
Along that lines, David and I were at a meeting, which may have precipitated his comments, where there was quite a bit of opposition, would you agree, David, to this whole concept? And it looked like there was a lot of misunderstanding among some people in the audience who should have been relatively well informed of what the pros and the cons and what was going on. Have we initiated, or is there any reason to initiate any kind of a public education on this of what's going on?
I think there probably should be, and following up on Councilman Shadid's request of getting some information at the council meeting will help. When this comes into effect, we're going to have to do a lot of public education. You can really only tax three things out there. You can tax the property that you own, which is a property tax, and we're not allowed to do that in Oklahoma for operations. You can tax your income, which is we don't do in Oklahoma either, or you can tax commerce, which is a sales tax out there. And, whether they're regressive or not regressive, there's all kinds of debates about that. But the fact of the matter is, taxing commerce is our only option, and that's what we use to fund our police and our fire and our public works departments and our parks departments. It's sales tax, and that's what we do, and we tax commerce. Well, with the advent of the advancement of the internet and people buying so much off of that, they used to buy these items, whether it was at Sears or at Best Buy or wherever, and they don't do that anymore. They're being purchased online, and under certain circumstances, they are not charged sales tax. Under certain circumstances, they are charged sales tax. Certain circumstances, they are not. And so that, one, it's an unlevel playing field out there, but it's clearly an unlevel playing field for people that have buildings and are employing people in Oklahoma City, and then people are choosing not to buy from them and go online and not pay sales tax. And so it's kind of a double hit on that. And so it really is, the tax is owed, whether you buy it online or you buy it at the store. The tax is owed on commerce, and that's how we fund our government. And again, some people have been going around that for years, and this is an attempt to fill that gap.
And Mayor, if I may just make one final comment. If we do consider any type of education program, I would like to suggest that we also bring out the point that we should encourage citizens of Oklahoma City to try to purchase goods whenever they can within the city limits, because when they go out to outlying suburbs and adjoining cities, that revenue goes to those cities, and people who are concerned with more sidewalks, additional police officers, you name it, they can help us achieve those goals by doing as much shopping and purchasing of goods within the city limits. So
a buy local plan, a buy local program.
Yes. Thank you. Larry?
Would Channel 20 be an avenue, Jim, that could promote this kind of dialogue?
I think we'd have several means of education, but that would clearly be one of them, Mr.
Before we adjourn, go ahead, Pete.
Okay, I would think it's in our best interest to try to promote the fact that people owe the money already. I mean, I think a lot of people, or some people at least, might pay it if they really understood they already owe it. When I tell people sometimes, well, don't you put that on your state income tax return there? And they don't even know what I'm talking about.
There was a state program, if you recall, it was actually a TV campaign at the end of last year, and they talked about the elephant in the room.
Right.
I don't know if you remember that one. And the elephant in the room was not paying your net sales tax. Right. There was a scenario.
But I think it might be an easier pill to swallow if people recognize that this was just a method of collecting taxes they already owed anyway. It's not a new tax at all. And I think that's where the education might be helpful, is try to get people to understand that they already owe it. I don't know that it'll work, but at least we'll be out there saying that you owe it.
Very valid point.
Before we adjourn, we have someone who signed up that wanted to speak under claims recommended for denial. So I appreciate the council's attention to stay with us. Marva Pakula. And I assume this is under item 8HI, which carries your name.
Yes.
We will need your name and address for the record, Marva.
My name is Marva Pikula. Address is 8109 Northwest 113th Street.
Okay. And what can you tell us about your claim?
I had parked my vehicle on the street that particular day after it had been detailed, and the next day was the big trash day, and we had the trash cans right in front of, well, I parked on the street and the trash cans were in the front of my car. So when the big truck came by, it seemed as though he hit the front of my car and kept going. Didn't take the trash at that point, but pulled up to my neighbor's house and had stopped there, I guess. I'm not exactly sure for what, but when she came out, and she gave me a letter, when she came out, she had saw that they were just sitting there waiting. They had taken her trash and not taken ours at that point. I'm assuming after they had hit the car. And around 8:30, once I noticed that the car had been hit, then I had to call the police at that point. They came out and gave me a report, and also the police had peeled some of the tire marks off of my car and gave me that. So I do have that, and I have pictures, and there's still the paint from the bottom of the truck on my car.
Okay. Why don't you hand those out, and we'll hear from staff and see what their report indicates. Go ahead and hand those.
Yeah, I don't have the pictures with me. I had sent them to them.
Oh,
she has them.
Okay.
But I do have the tire, the rubber from the tire.
What does our report say?
The traffic collision report and the information from solid waste state that Waste Management services the claimant's address. And so they are an independent contractor, and there's an exemption under the Governmental Tort Claims Act for that. So the city is not liable.
Okay, so what you're saying...
But they have been provided contact information, have you not, with Waste Management, so you can file a claim with them?
I did file a claim with them.
Okay.
And I received a letter saying that they would recommend it to be denied.
Well, can I see that letter?
No, that's from us.
I'm sorry I left that.
Yeah, just bring it up here. Let the city manager and I see it. No, up here. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Marta, this is not from Waste Management. This is from us. And so I think what I'm telling you is that our legal counsel says that if there's a claim that's due, it's going to be a liability of Waste Management, which is a national firm that services Oklahoma City on a contract basis to pick up our trash. So contractually, we are not liable for your claim. If anyone is liable, it would be Waste Management, and they have not denied your claim based on what you told us.
And in the letter here is the contact information for Waste Management to submit the claim with them. They're somebody that we hire to pick up the trash, and so if they damaged your vehicle, then you should file a claim with them.
Okay. We're sorry it happened. All right. Doesn't seem like any more action is needed, so we'll adjourn. Thank you all.
September.